I walked into my house and my stomach dropped. The gun safe, the one I'd spent decades filling with my father's prized rifles, and my service weapon was wide open, empty. Every gun gone. And then I saw a note taped to the door. Meet me at the Red Canyon HOA office if you want your property back. Melissa Grant, HOA president. I wasn't even part of her HOA. She had no right to touch my things. But she thought she could steal from me. Big mistake. Because Melissa Grant had just started a war, and I wasn't the kind of guy who backs down easily. But there's one thing she didn't expect. She never thought I'd be ready to turn the tables. Melissa Grant wasn't just the HOA president. She was the embodiment of control, smiling politely at neighborhood barbecues, her eyes always calculating. People thought she was just an uptight suburban tyrant. But she was more than that. Much more. She had a way of making you feel small, like a pesky fly she'd flick away when she got bored. But she wasn't playing a game with me. No, she wanted my land. She wanted everything I owned, and she thought she could scare me into handing it over. The worst part, she wasn't even doing it herself. Melissa always had volunteers do her dirty work, like the nervous kid I saw parked outside my place. Brent. But the real puppeteer, that was Melissa. She was the kind of woman who didn't just want control, she needed it. And she wasn't about to let some retired cop ruin her plans. I'd moved to Red Canyon with one goal in mind: peace. After 25 years of chasing criminals and solving cases, I needed to find somewhere quiet, somewhere I could just breathe again. Arizona, with its wide open spaces and the desert's heat that seemed to ground you, felt like the perfect place to put my feet up and leave the past behind. I'd built my house with my own two hands, brick by brick, all on land I loved. My father's legacy lived here too. His 1954 Winchester sat in my gun safe, a family heirloom I never let anyone forget. I wasn't interested in suburban politics. But that was before Melissa Grant, the HOA president, made it clear she didn't see things the same way. I wasn't part of the Red Canyon. HOA never had been. My land wasn't even in their jurisdiction, but that didn't stop her. The first time I noticed her was when she sent one of her security volunteers to check on my place. A pale-faced kid in a white SUV pretending to be looking at his phone while clearly keeping an eye on me. I ignored him at first. But then the visits started happening more frequently until it felt like there were eyes on my house every time I stepped outside. It was subtle, but I could feel the pressure. One evening, after a long day of mowing the yard, I walked inside ready to grab a beer and relax. But what I found wasn't relaxation. It was a violation. My gun safe. The one thing I had to protect the memories of my father and my service years was wide open, empty, every rifle, every handgun gone. And then there was the note, a simple, arrogant message. Meet me at the Red Canyon HOA office if you want your property back. Melissa Grant, HOA president. The air in the house went cold. It wasn't just the theft. It was the fact that she thought she had the right to take what was mine. She didn't know it, but she'd just opened a door to something much bigger than she was prepared for. I wasn't just going to let her get away with it. No, Melissa had just made a big mistake. Because now, it wasn't just about a break-in. It was about me protecting my home, my father's legacy, and everything I'd worked for. I should have called the sheriff's office immediately, but something told me that wouldn't be the right move. Melissa wasn't stupid. She wanted me emotional rash. She wanted me to make a mistake. So I held back. Took a deep breath, steadied myself, and turned my focus back to the house. First, I checked my living room. Everything was normal, but something felt off. My gut twisted as I walked to the back door, still locked. No forced entry. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. No breaking windows, no mess. They had a plan, and my guns were their target. I moved quietly, methodically through the house, checking for anything else out of place. That's when I smelled a faint, cheap perfume, strong enough to stand out in the quiet of the house. I traced the scent toward the gun safe. As I bent down to inspect, my eyes caught a small detail, a streak of bright red lipstick smudged on the door frame. Melissa's lipstick. I cursed under my breath. She was taunting me now. I stood there for a while, piecing it together. Melissa Grant wasn't just after a few items in my house. She'd planned this, and it was personal. The only thing she took was my guns. Not cash, not electronics, just my firearms, my family's history. There was something bigger going on, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I stepped outside onto the porch to clear my head, the dry Arizona air hitting me like a slap. I noticed the same white SUV parked across the road. The so-called security volunteers were out there, pretending to check their phones, but obviously keeping an eye on me. I locked eyes with one of them, Brent the kid, who always looked out of place, and sure enough, he quickly looked away. Inside, I grabbed my phone and dialed Detective Sam Harlow, an old partner from my time on the force. He picked up on the second ring. "Jack, you finally calling me about that HOA circus," he said. "No time for jokes, Sam. Someone broke into my house today, cleaned out my gun safe. And it's Melissa Grant." There was a long pause on the other end. Sam wasn't the silent type unless something serious hit him. "Say that again," he asked. "All of it. My guns. Gone." And she left a note. "Meet me at the Red Canyon HOA office if you want your property back. Melissa Grant, HOA president." Sam swore. "That's not just theft, Jack. That's burglary, felony, breaking and entering. If she had someone crack your safe, hell, we're talking conspiracy." "I know, but here's the thing," I said, voice steady. "She's expecting me to call the sheriff to make a scene. I need to keep it low. I don't want her to move the guns or destroy any evidence." Sam was quiet for a beat. "You're playing with fire, Jack. But I get it. You go ahead and play smart. I'll have Ethan check into the financial side of things. But, Jack, be careful. She's not just after your guns, she's after something bigger." I hung up, my mind racing. Melissa Grant had just crossed a line. She wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was a criminal, and I was in her sights. But she made a mistake. She thought she could intimidate me. She didn't know who she was dealing with. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning. I stayed calm, collected, watching for her next move. The pressure built. I knew she'd be expecting me to get angry, to make a mistake, but I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I had to stay one step ahead. Melissa's volunteers kept up their watch parking across the street in their white SUV. It wasn't subtle, but I didn't make a move. I didn't give them anything to report back. I waited for the right moment to make my move, and when it came, I was ready. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her take what was mine. She had no idea who she was messing with. I stepped into the Red Canyon HOA office, and it felt like I was walking straight into the belly of the beast. The building looked more like a dentist's office than anything official, sterile, quiet, too calm. But it was a trap, and I knew it. Melissa Grant had made sure of that. I could feel my heartbeat steadying every instinct, telling me to stay calm. I wasn't here for pleasantries. I was here to take back what was mine. But as I walked closer, something felt wrong. The office was eerily silent, the lights on, but no one moving inside. It was too quiet, like a setup. I paused outside the conference room door, my hand hovering over the handle. I could hear footsteps in the hallway, but no voices. The kind of silence that only comes when someone is watching, waiting for you to make a move. When I finally stepped inside, she was waiting, sitting at the head of the table, calm as ever. Melissa Grant, the so-called HOA president, was dressed in her usual red power suit, her eyes locked on me like a lion sizing up its prey. "Jack Coleman," she purred. "I'm glad you could finally join me." Her voice was too smooth, too calculated. I didn't respond. I just stood there, my hand resting on the grip of the gun at my side. I wasn't here to play games. Melissa didn't seem fazed. She smiled and gestured to the chair across from her. "Have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." "I'm not here to discuss anything with you," I said, flatly. "You broke into my house, stole my guns, and now you expect me to play nice. No. This ends now." Her smile faltered for a split second, but she quickly recovered, like she was expecting this. "You don't understand, Jack. I'm doing this for the good of the community." I scoffed. "No, you're doing this because you think you own everything. You think you can control people, intimidate them, and they'll fall in line." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You're mistaken. I don't want to control you. I just want you to understand that the HOA is in charge here. We run this community. I have the power, Jack." "Not anymore," I said. "Not when you break the law." Her eyes flashed with something darker. "You think you can take me down just like that? You're wrong. I'm in control of this neighborhood. I have the board, the volunteers, the power. You're just one man." Before she could continue, a voice cut through the tension, sharp and official. "Melissa Grant, step away from the weapon." I didn't need to turn around to know it was Sam. He'd arrived with backup, and this time, Melissa's game was over. 2 deputies stormed into the room, their guns trained on her. Her hand was still gripping the rifle, but the moment she saw Sam, her expression shifted from smug confidence to something like fear. "You don't get to make the rules here anymore," Sam said, his voice low and calm. "You're under arrest for burglary, extortion, and trafficking in stolen firearms." Her face went pale as she finally dropped the rifle, realizing the game was up. Sam nodded, and the deputies moved in, cuffing her as she sputtered incoherently about her rights. "This is a misunderstanding," she spat. "You can't do this. I run this community. You'll never get away with it." But as they dragged her toward the door, her threats fell silent. The illusion of control she'd spent years building was crumbling. I stood there watching the deputies escort her out, and for the first time in days, I felt something I hadn't in a long while: relief. But the story wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. Melissa might have been arrested, but her empire of fear, manipulation, and illegal schemes didn't vanish overnight. The real work was just beginning. Sam caught my eye and gave a brief nod, the silent understanding between us clear. "This is just the start," he said quietly. I didn't need to say anything. I was ready for what came next. Melissa had made the mistake of thinking she could break me. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't some suburban target. I was a man with a legacy to protect, and I wasn't about to let her or anyone else take it from me. The aftermath of that night still felt surreal. As I walked outside, the desert air seemed somehow different, as though the weight of Melissa's tyranny had finally been lifted from the neighborhood. The deputies had her in cuffs, but there was more to do. This wasn't just about her. It was about everything she'd tried to build on lies and threats, a network of manipulation that stretched beyond just one woman. As they drove her away in the sheriff's cruiser, I noticed the HOA volunteers standing off to the side, their faces a mix of relief and confusion. They hadn't known the full extent of what Melissa had been doing. Some of them looked like they were on the verge of breaking down, realizing how much they'd been a part of this system. Brent, the nervous kid who had been watching my place for days, was among them. He caught my eye as I walked past, and I could see the shame in his face. I didn't know the whole story, but I could tell he wasn't happy about being part of this. "Hey," I called out to him. He flinched slightly, then stepped forward. "I didn't know it was going this far," he muttered, his voice shaking. She said if I didn't help, she'd go after my family. I thought it was just about fines, but..." He trailed off, glancing at the deputies, clearly scared. "It's over now," I said quietly, more for his sake than anything. "You're not in this anymore." Brent looked at the ground, clearly torn, but then nodded. I'll stay out of it, I promise." I gave him a tight nod. He wasn't the bad guy here. He was just another pawn in Melissa's game. I turned back toward the building, feeling the weight of what had happened sink in. It wasn't just about the guns anymore. It wasn't about Melissa breaking into my home and taking what wasn't hers. No, this had been about control, power. The kind of power that can crush you if you let it. But I wasn't going to be crushed. Not today, not ever. Detective Sam Harlow and I stood near the front door, watching as the officers filed in and out, gathering evidence from the building. There was still a lot of work to do. Sam turned to me, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. "This isn't over," he said. "We've got a lot more to uncover. She's been running a whole operation behind the scenes. Weapons, financial schemes, you name it. And if she's this deep in, there are others involved." I knew that. I could feel it in my bones. The whole system she'd built couldn't have been hers alone. There were strings pulled from higher up. People who'd let her get away with all of it, who didn't care about the damage she caused. People who'd been watching, waiting for her to slip up. And now that she had, they would be scrambling to cover their tracks. But for now, it was quiet. The world felt just a little bit freer. Melissa Grant's empire of fear was in ruins, and I could feel the shift in the air. It was like the town could finally exhale. "Sam," I said, my voice steady, "what happens now?" Sam gave a half smile, like he understood what I was asking. "Now we keep digging. The ATF's already on our connections. We'll follow the money, follow the guns, and we'll take down the whole network. There's more to this than just her." I nodded, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. But we were closer to the end, closer to pulling back the curtain on all the lies. "Yeah," I said, "we'll find them, and we'll finish this." I headed back to my truck, the weight of the day sinking in. It had been a long fight, longer than I ever expected, but I wasn't backing down now. My land was mine. My father's legacy was intact, and Melissa Grant had underestimated me. She thought she could take it all from me with a few threats and a stolen gun collection. But she didn't know the first thing about me. As the sun set over the desert, I felt the warmth of it on my face, but there was no longer any unease in the air. This place, this land, was mine, and I would protect it with everything I had. Back at home, the deputies had returned the guns I'd lost. I opened the box slowly, one by one, the familiar weight of each weapon grounding me again. My father's Winchester, my service pistol, all of them back where they belonged. It was more than just a collection of firearms. It was everything I had left to remind me of the life I'd lived. And now, for the first time in a long while, I could breathe easy. The fight wasn't over, but I had the one thing Melissa Grant didn't control over my own life.